Long before she was a whisper in the stone corridors of Hogwarts, she was Helena, daughter of the brilliant and celebrated Rowena Ravenclaw, one of the 4 great founders of the school. To grow up in the shadow of such a mother was to live in a constant, overwhelming light. Rowena was revered for her intellect, her wisdom, her otherworldly creativity that had shaped the very architecture of the castle. Helena, though clever and beautiful in her own right, felt she could never truly escape that shadow. She was always the daughter of the great Rowena, her own accomplishments seeming pale in comparison. A quiet, gnawing envy began to take root in her heart. It was not a vicious envy, but a deeply human one, a desperate desire to be seen as more than just a reflection. She watched her mother wear the enchanted diadem, a silver circlet that was said to enhance the wisdom of the wearer. She saw the reverence in the eyes of others as her mother spoke, her words woven with an intelligence that seemed to come from the diadem itself. Helena began to believe that the diadem was not just an enhancer of wisdom, but the very source of it. And a dangerous, foolish thought began to form in her mind. If she possessed the diadem, she too could be as wise, as respected, as celebrated as her mother. Perhaps even more so, Dot. The decision was made in the quiet turmoil of her own heart. One moonless night, while her mother was deep in consultation with the other founders, Helena slipped into her chambers. Her hands trembled as she lifted the beautiful, delicate diadem from its velvet cushion. It felt cool to the touch, and it seemed to hum with a quiet, ancient power. She did not feel like a thief. In her own mind, she was merely borrowing a key to a future where she would finally be recognized for her own brilliance. With the diadem hidden beneath her cloak, Helena Ravenclaw fled Hogwarts, fled Scotland, vanishing into the night, leaving behind only a note of brief, cold apology. She was heading for the dark, remote forests of Albania, a place she felt she could disappear and finally begin her own legacy. The forests of Albania were a world away from the manicured grounds of Hogwarts. They were wild, ancient, and deeply lonely. Helena found a hiding place in the hollow of a great gnarled tree, and there she placed the diadem upon her head, waiting for the promised surge of profound wisdom to flood her mind. But nothing happened. The diadem remained a cold, silent weight upon her brow. It did not speak to her, did not grant her brilliant insights or profound knowledge. The birds in the trees did not sing her praises. She was still just Helena, but now she was Helena, the thief, alone in a foreign wilderness. The terrible truth began to dawn on her. The diadem did not create wisdom. It merely amplified the wisdom that was already there. Her mother's brilliance was her own. In her desperate attempt to claim her mother's power, she had only proven her own foolishness. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Her regret grew into a heavy, suffocating shroud. She lived a life of hiding, surviving on what she could. Forage, the beautiful, magical diadem, a constant, mocking reminder of her terrible mistake. She was too proud, too ashamed to return to Hogwarts and face her mother. So she remained, a ghost of a girl living in the deep woods, her heart aching with a loneliness more profound than any she had ever known. Back at Hogwarts, Rowena Ravenclaw was heartbroken. She told no one, not even the other founders, that the diadem had been stolen by her own daughter. She pretended it was simply misplaced, all while a terrible illness, born of grief and a broken heart, began to consume her. Sensing that her end was near, she had one final wish, to see her daughter one last time. Knowing she was too weak to travel herself, she sent the one person she knew was obsessed enough to find Helena, a man who had long professed his love for her daughter, the Baron. The Baron had always been a man of fierce, volatile passions. His love for Helena was an all-consuming fire, a possessive obsession that she had never returned. He had been enraged by her disappearance and readily accepted Rowena's dying wish, seeing it as his chance to finally bring Helena back and claim her as his own. He tracked her for weeks, his relentless pursuit finally leading him to the dark forests of Albania. He found her by a small stream, her beautiful robes now tattered and travel-worn, her face pale with sorrow. "Helena," he said, his voice rough, with emotion, "your mother is dying. She begs you to return." Helena looked at him, her heart a knot of shame and grief. She was horrified to hear of her mother's illness, but her pride was a powerful, stubborn thing. She refused. She could not bear for her mother to see her like this, a failure and a thief. She turned to run, to disappear once more into the woods. Baron's obsessive love, twisted by her refusal, curdled into a white-hot rage. He had come all this way, had finally found her, and she was rejecting him still. His control snapped. He drew his sword, not with the intent to kill, but to intimidate, to stop her from leaving him again. In the heat of his fury, he lunged. The movement was too fast, his anger too blind. The blade struck true. For a moment, there was a stunned silence. Helena looked down at the wound, a look of profound, quiet shock on her face, before sinking to the forest floor. The Baron stared at what he had done, the red of his sword a stark contrast to the pale forest light. The fire of his rage was instantly extinguished, replaced by a wave of cold, absolute horror and remorse, so powerful that it shattered his mind. He had destroyed the one thing he had ever truly loved. Overwhelmed by a grief he could not bear, he raised the same sword and without a moment's hesitation took his own life, falling beside her. Death was not the end. It was a change. Their spirits, tethered to the world by the violent, unresolved trauma of their final moments, were drawn back to the one place that had been the center of their lives, Hogwarts. Helena returned as a serene, silent specter, forever gliding through the corridors, her grief a quiet, shimmering aura. The Baron returned too, covered in her spectral silver blood, forever rattling the chains of his eternal regret, becoming the terrifying ghost of Slytherin. House the Bloody Baron. For nearly 1,000 years, Helena wandered. She became known as the Grey Lady, the quiet, beautiful ghost of Ravenclaw Tower. She rarely spoke, and never, ever, about her past or the diadem she had hidden in that hollow tree so long ago. The secret was her burden, her penance centuries past, until one day a student came to her. He was not like the others. He was charming, handsome, and deeply persuasive. He seemed to understand her loneliness, her regret. He spoke to her of ambition, of greatness, of relics of the founders. His name was Tom Riddle. With honeyed words and a feigned sympathy, he managed to do what no one else had ever done. He charmed the secret of the diadem's location from her. It was the final, bitter betrayal. a mistake that would have terrible consequences for the entire wizarding world. Helena retreated further into her silence, her guilt now doubled. It was many, many years later that another boy came to her, a boy with untidy black hair and piercing green eyes. He did not try to charm her. He spoke to her of his desperate need, of his fight against the very same evil she had unwittingly helped. He spoke to her not as a ghost, but as a person who had made a mistake. And in his honest, desperate plea, Helena Ravenclaw, the Grey Lady, finally found a measure of redemption. She gave him the final piece of the puzzle, revealing the diadem's hiding place, and in doing so, helped to finally defeat the dark legacy of Tom Riddle. Her long-kept, sorrowful secret had at last served a noble purpose. And though she still wanders the halls, her lament is a little softer now, her ghostly form a little brighter, like a soul that has finally found a measure of peace.